Welcome back to Reldrick Geo, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at another Think School video, and this one in particular is a quick interview with Dr. Sushi Tharoor. Dr. Sushi Tharoor. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm beyond bad when it comes to names. Even in my own language, it is rough for me when it comes to names. But I think I'm saying his name right. Anyways, it's Think School. Ganesh is interviewing him for his podcast, where they're going to be talking over a lot of the Congress like manifesto stuff. Look at the video title right here: Why Congress is Giving Freebies and MSP. How Kerala's crisis happens. There's a crisis in Kerala. I'm not, familiar with that. I'm not 100% familiar with the Congress manifesto. I did try to read over some of it. Try, but there's a lot of things, a lot of information here that I'm hoping to get from this. I've watched and reacted to a lot of videos of the Dr. Tharoor here, and I've really liked what he had to say before, so hopefully he can, spread a little bit more insight my way. But yeah, without further ado, we're gonna sit here and watch this Think School video here. Nice little 1 hour long podcast. Let's get it started.
That said, that we will double the income of farmers in our time in office in one term has had two terms, and the income of farmers has not even gone up by 10%.
When I spoke to the BJP leaders, they told me that there was COVID in between, there was Russia-Ukraine war in between, pesticides, fertilizers, all the costs shot
And
up.
their own irresponsible act of demonetization as well.
The Congress manifesto mentions that you're going to give out 1 lakh rupees to the women at the bottom of the pyramid. I just did some math and I found out that if 1 lakh rupees is given to 30 million women, that comes out to 3 lakh crores. With 3 lakh crores, that's the education budget of the country, half the defense budget, and we can build 30,000 kilometers of highways. Why give them direct cash in their bank accounts?
It's so much.
All the information that I have clearly says that MSP is a disaster. But I want to understand from you, sir, why is MSP a good thing for the economy of India?
A bunch of farmers have told me it costs them 20 rupees to grow a pineapple, an individual pineapple, and the market gives them 6 rupees. How do you expect us to live?
Majority of the wheat in the world comes from Russia and Ukraine. Corn comes from US, and palm oil, as you mentioned, comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, unless we are able to beat their prices, MSP will not help. The most literate state in the country, God's own country, facing an economic disaster. How did that happen?
Wait, did he just say the most illiterate state is Kerala? Is that true? Really? I didn't know that. The Indian Business Podcast. One thing I will say, I have really been enjoying the Think School videos.
Hi everybody. Following is a conversation that we had with one of the most iconic members of the Indian National Congress, who's none other than Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Shashi Tharoor. Shashi Tharoor. Okay. I think did I say that right at the beginning? I don't remember.
In this episode, we spoke at length about two important subjects. Number one is the subject of Kerala. We tried to understand what exactly.
Also, I've been calling Kerala the wrong name the whole time. It's kind of like with me with Karnataka. I've been calling it Karnataka, like the American way. Wow, look at Karnataka, and I've been calling Kerala Kerala. I'm sorry. Again, bad with names.
Exactly is a fundamental problem in the governance of Kerala. Why does a literate state like Kerala face rampant unemployment today? And most importantly, we also try to understand as to why is Kerala facing an economic crisis. The second thing that we spoke about is the Congress manifesto. And I questioned him as much as possible about the freebies that the Congress party is planning to give out, about the downsides of making MSP a legal right, and most importantly, we spoke about the vision that Congress has for India. And I must tell you that just like Gadkari sir, even Shashi Shashi sir was very kind to answer all of our questions to the best of his ability in the 1 hour time that we found. So as usual, it's up to you to decide if his answers were satisfactory or not. Also guys, this episode has been shot and produced by the most trusted marketing and production agency in the country, which is Owl Media. It is run by my dear friend Ayush Wadhwa. They have worked with some of the most legendary brands in the country and with some of the biggest celebrities in the country. So if you're looking out for a marketing agency to produce game-changing advertisements for your company, check out Owl Media from the link in the description. If this is clear to you, let's get started with this episode of the Indian Business Podcast with Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Hello sir.
Hi Ganesh, how are you?
I'm very good sir. Welcome to the Indian Business Podcast.
Thank you.
Shashank just told me about your schedule and I'm so grateful that you gave me 1 hour of your busy schedule.
Oh, did I? I didn't even realize that. They've given me an hour of my schedule, but I'm already running late, so let's get cracking.
Okay. Sir, usually when we do this podcast, we first get to know the person. But today, since we are falling short of time, I just have very specific governance-related questions. And I want to understand from you, from the leader of this country, as to how does governance work? And I want to fundamentally understand what is the definition of good governance. So these questions are based on stats coming from the community itself. And you can help me understand the answers to these questions very well, because mainstream media doesn't provide enough data or information for us to understand. The first question comes from your speech at the NSS, sir. And you said that the unemployment among the youth in Kerala was 40% in June 2022. And you also stated a larger problem in Kerala, which is when it comes to other states, the uneducated and unskilled people are jobless. But in Kerala, the most literate state in the country, the youth of this state is...
Oh, okay. So the most literate. All right. When in the very beginning, I heard it as the most illiterate. Again, probably a me issue. But 40% unemployment, that's wild. That's for the youth, 40% unemployment. That seems really high.
jobless in spite of getting good education. What exactly is the problem with Kerala, sir?
Lack of opportunities is the problem. Some cases there is a mismatch between what they have studied and what the marketplace wants. This is a chronic issue. When I was in the Ministry of Education, we actually looked at some studies that have been conducted by business organizations. FICCI and ASSOCHAM, I remember, had both done studies asking employers about the people they were recruiting. And there was a widespread dissatisfaction. I think the FICCI study, if I'm not mistaken, one of the two studies said 82% of the employers were dissatisfied. This is a nationwide study, not just Kerala. Dissatisfied with the quality of the graduates whom they were recruiting. Now, as you know, both Infosys and Tata, TCS, found a solution in essentially offering remedial education, not just on-the-job training, but remedial education to the people they hired. They gave them another year of schooling, essentially, in a very campus-like setting, to teach them what they should have learned already in university. Now, there's very few companies that can afford to do that at that scale and with that quality of instruction. So many people go into the job marketplace, unfortunately unable to offer the skills that their own qualifications would normally have expected that they be equipped with.
So does it come down to the core? Is what he's saying is the schooling, the original schooling is the problem? Because if these businesses are having to give, an extra year of education before they can even hire somebody on, then the problem goes back to the schools, and there needs to be like a referendum around the schools, and they'll look at the curriculum of what exactly they're teaching for their degrees, I guess.
On the flip side of the thing, I saw, for example, when I headed the All India Professionals Congress, in Kerala, they conducted a survey amongst Kerala engineering graduates and found that 66% of these engineering graduates were in jobs that didn't require an engineering degree. So essentially, they had ended up not being able to use their degree for the employment that they eventually got. And that means two obvious things. One is what I already mentioned, the mismatch between what is taught and what is needed in the marketplace. And the second, perhaps, is an oversupply of the wrong kind of qualifications. We have to recognize that a country like ours that produces over 500,000 engineers every year is producing 500,000, God knows, 400,000 engineers too many with the wrong kind of qualifications, but perhaps not enough in the fields where there really is a hunger and a demand for more people. Maybe we need people with qualifications in AI, in robotics and machine learning and so on, and not people who can build the kinds of things that they're taught currently in engineering colleges to build. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what those are, and I don't want to imply that I have a ready-made answer. But I will say that the problem is staring us in the face.
I'm an engineer, sir, so I can understand what you're saying. Because in my college also, in fact, even I am an unemployable civil engineer.
Why are you unemployable?
Because I don't know how to build buildings. And I barely pass my exams. And even if students pass these exams, if you go and ask them practical questions, they won't be able to answer. That is because we just stick to books which have data that is outdated, content that is outdated, concept that is outdated.
But that's also a problem.
Yeah, so nobody's teaching us about the pile engineering in Dubai. We're just learning about some random foundation and concepts which are not relevant today.
That is a genuine worry, and that's something which I believe the government could play an important role in trying to ginger up the base level of instruction that's going on.
I do want to say, although I have not been to school in a very long time, one thing that I have noticed upon reflection on a lot of the stuff, and this is a basis from me from the U.S. in U.S. based schools, a lot of what the schools teach, it's not really relevant to the jobs that a lot of these people are going for. So you do see a lot of people that go to school to get certain degrees that they just don't do anything with, right? They said before, there's a large number of students that are going into engineering that don't actually do any engineering work when they're done. It's the same thing over here in the U.S. as well.
We did something with the polytechnics. We passed a rule that no new polytechnic could be established in India unless they had a tie-up with a currently functioning industry within a 30-kilometer radius. Because the problem was polytechnics were being established, completely divorced from the real world, no connection to industry. We teachers teaching, as you rightly said, out-of-date textbooks and trying to impart instruction in obsolete techniques. And then when people left these polytechnics, they essentially found that they knew nothing that was actually useful in the marketplace, but they had a diploma or a degree to show for it. I remember when one of the leading newspapers in Kerala started a television channel. They asked me to inaugurate their new building and studio and so on. I went and did that. And I strolled around looking at the very state-of-the-art facilities at that time, a few years ago. And I saw a couple of kids at this very impressive computerized sort of control studio, lots of screens everywhere. They were fiddling with some controls. So I said, so what did you guys study? They look very young people, a boy and a girl, must have been in their 20s. And I said, so what did you study? And they said, we studied mass communication. They named a prestigious institute. So I said, so all this must be easy for you. You must have learned all this stuff before coming here. They said, no, sir. All this equipment is completely new to us. What we learned was an equipment that no one uses anymore in the industry. Yeah. And so they got hired on the basis of having learned the wrong things.
Wow.
But I guess they had some basics that the company thought would be usefully adaptable. And then they learned on the job from the people who supplied the equipment how to use it. That kind of thing
is so common. And it's just going to keep getting more and more common. That just was... You'd almost have to have it where the businesses themselves provide the education directly. Well, I mean, yeah, he even said it at the very beginning. They added a year of supplemental, but instead of going to this university, you go to that business, you go to that company. But then you get into the whole mess of, oh, okay, you're locked into this company because you only know how to do what they taught you and what they require of you, so you can't really go to any other stuff. So that goes and that muddies up the whole situation as well. There just does need to be some sort of reform or some sort of I don't even know. I'm not smart enough to to give a resolution to this issue.
It's worrying because this kind of obsolete instruction is what most of our students are equipped with when they enter the marketplace.
Sir, so from the governance standpoint, how do we solve this problem? How do we build a system where education works hand in hand with the industry and not individually.
Again, we thought about this problem. We got Mr. Narayana Murthy to do a study on academia-industry interface. And I have to tell you, he wrote a very good report that sadly, soon after we lost and left, has been more or less shelved by the government. And I think it's a mistake. They should have, I mean, not everything the UPA government did needs to have been disavowed by the NDA. And one day when we take over from the NDA, we will not disavow any of the good things they may have done, though I don't see too many examples of it during an election season in particular. But I will say that
Burn right there. Just you always have to throw in a political burn when you can, right?
Mr. Narayana Murthy made some very valid points. One of the things that struck me, having spent a large number of years in the US, was how common it was in the US that a company, when it came up with an idea, would go to a nearby campus and say, guys, have you got any graduate students or doctoral students who can research this for us? If they can make this idea viable and figure out a way of how it could be manufactured, we will first of all give you all the money for their research, and we pay their stipends and so on. And then if a product is makeable and we make it, we'll share the royalties with you. And so it's a win-win for the university, for the students, and for the company. They don't have to hire people on spec, as it were. The students get a practical work opportunity, which may or may not work out for them, but if it works out, fantastic. If it works out, there's benefits on both sides. And there's a direct connection between a real functioning industry and an academic establishment. Now, this is very common.
I do want to say that does happen, but it's very rare and typically only with prestigious schools, right? You're not looking at, countrywide representation to where these businesses, come to the universities and work with the students. It's a bit more a bit more isolated, a bit more focused on the top end.
This is how Silicon Valley was built. This is how the Raleigh-Durham Triangle in North Carolina came into being. In India, it's practically unknown. And I made speeches in those days as minister encouraging more of this to happen in our country. And I think the government's job is to create an enabling environment. We should create a framework. I mean, I say we are not yet in government, though we hope to be at the end of this election. But the government of India should create an enabling framework.
From what I've seen, I understand that the Tharoor is part of the Congress party, right? But from what I've seen, I guess BJP has been, pretty prevalent in keeping hold of the power. Now, of course, there's still, a month left of of voting. I don't know how many phases are left, but yeah, there's still quite a bit of time still, right?
Framework that facilitates, makes it possible, maybe even gives incentives for this kind of thing to happen. It's startling, for example, that in most of the advanced countries, the bulk of investment in research comes from the private sector. In India, the bulk of investment in research, and it's not enough, is coming from the government sector. That shouldn't be happening. Why should the taxpayer be bearing the burden when, in fact, in every other country, the private sector is carrying the burden? In OECD countries, something like 75% of all research expenditure comes from the private sector. In India, it's about 80-90% from the government. Let's reverse that. Let's get more private sector money into research. Now, my figures may be slightly out of date because my in-depth data goes back to when I was in government. And that's now 10 years ago. But I will say that it couldn't have improved that much from what I've seen. And it needs to improve a heck of a lot more. But the government, in turn, should make it attractive for businesses to spend that money on research and development by giving them tax breaks and other incentives.
Something like CSR, but for research. Like
Corporate social responsibility is a form of self-regulation that encourages companies to contribute to societal goals through philanthropic, activist, and charitable activities.
research linked incentive program.
Yeah.
Right? So you also
And in
spoke
turn,
about
university should get extra credit for enabling this kind of thing so that they benefit and the students benefit. I'm also a big believer in university autonomy. Maybe a university located right next to an industry will have the freedom to do things that other universities don't. A university somewhere else might have another kind of freedom. Give them the autonomy, and eventually students will vote with their feet as well.
Yeah, but then that comes down to that same thing I said before, where if you have the connection with, a corporation, a business, one particular company, you're just going to get locked into, their way of teaching, their way of doing work. It's going to be like where they have a monopoly over the students and no other company can break out and, get ahead because they're gobbling up all the students. I don't know.
I mean, if the university is hopeless or is not doing anything relevant, students will go elsewhere where they've already heard that you go to that place and they're doing cutting edge work in this field or that field, or they've got to tie up with this company and that industry. People will go. And as a result, you'll see which educational system grows better.
Very interesting, sir. Sir, you also mentioned ease of doing business. And here you again quoted Niti Aayog and you said that in Kerala, it takes a minimum of 248 days to set up a business, whereas the average figure for India is 120 days. Sir, can you give me an example as to why does it take such a long time to set up a business in Kerala?
Well, first of all, I think it's to do with the processes of government. Okay. Every file requires 4 or 5 signatures and in particular order of sequence. If one guy's on leave or sick or traveling somewhere on duty or whatever, the file just sits until he comes back and signs that file. Then it goes up the chain, the same thing happens and so on. Totally unnecessary. This is, I've learned
completely.
This for a simple procedure like getting approvals for a house, to build a house in Tharoor.
This sounds like California, by the way.
Everything requires multiple people to be involved, multiple clearances. Why does it need to be? I mean, I've urged that if we come to power in Kerala, we should have the entire administrative regulatory apparatus reviewed and slashed. I mean, if Singapore and America can clear a business in 3 days, it doesn't even need the 120 that India as an average takes. It should not need 240. Or I think the exact numbers were 236, I think, and
That's
or
so
238
long.
and 126 or something like that. Whatever it may be. Those numbers are unacceptable in the modern age, and it puts us at a major disadvantage with other countries. I don't know what the days required are in China, Vietnam, Malaysia, and so on, but they're all very much better than us. Maybe not as good as Singapore, but not at all much worse.
So do you think single window clearance system is a solution to this problem?
That's part of it.
Single window, excuse me. Single window system is one-stop portal investors, which will help entrepreneurs secure various clearances without going to department physically. So just online. Okay.
But the single window must work efficiently. If you understaff a single window, it becomes a logjam rather than a blessing.
Can you give me an example, sir? You mentioned approvals. Can you give me an example of a business owner requiring approvals and because of which...
you need approvals for everything. You need approvals for the business itself. You need approvals for where you're going to erect your factory or whatever. You need approvals at every stage of the process. For the equipment you're going to buy and bring in there, you'll need approvals. You'll need environmental clearances, land clearances, fire clearances, water clearances. And in each of these cases, there's multiple levels of clearance involved. It's a over-regulated system, but that's true of everything in our country. Our educational system is over-regulated too and under-governed. Governance is about facilitating outcomes. Our country's regulation is about controlling processes. And this business of process versus outcome is something that we have to drill into the heads of our bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy exists to ensure that the process is followed. It now needs to turn around to ensure that the outcome is achieved.
To ask even if the process is needed in the first place or not.
Well, that's something that bureaucrats tend not to do because they inherit it from generations of bureaucrats before them.
That is very interesting, sir. Sir, now I want to talk to you about Kerala's economic crisis. We made a video about a month back, and during that time we saw some stats.
I haven't seen this video yet. I wanted to. I haven't got around to actually watching it yet.
And they were just very disturbing. 3.5 lakh government employees' salaries were delayed. The social security schemes of 55 lakh people was put on hold, and the state was asking the center for money. The most literate state in the country, God's own country, facing an economic disaster. How did that happen? And I saw it coming, strangely, because in 2021, RBI actually put out a research paper where they mentioned that there are certain states in the country that are heading the Sri Lanka way. And there, one of those states was Kerala. So, A, how did Kerala end up in an economic disaster? B, what are the lessons that other states have to learn from Kerala?
Well, I have to say, this is where politics comes into the answer, that the communists have done Kerala a huge disservice because...
Thank you. I've always been anti-communist. I'm sorry if you're communist. I do apologize. But as a true red-blooded American, I have always been anti-communist. Anyways.
In fighting for...
Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to interject. I always, it's weird, but I always have to I always had to throw that out there. I don't know. It's just my upbringing, I guess.
Workers' rights, which is something admirable. They have won those rights, but they've also driven away investors. And the result is that now you start anything from a tourist resort to a factory, and you dread the red flag showing up, and the people you've hired being unionized and put on strike, irrespective of how well you're treating them. And many people tend to back away because of that. I remember when I left the United Nations and before I came into politics, I was still based in New York, but I was taking an active interest in Kerala. And I remember hosting a dinner for about 40 investors in New York, mainly expatriate Indians with a particular interest in India, but also some Americans, for the then Communist Industry Minister, Elamaram Karim, and his senior bureaucrats to come and do a presentation why they should invest in Kerala. And I thought, I'm doing a favor to my own state. The presentation was done. There was a discussion. At the end of it all, the minister and his top aides went away, and the 40 investors had a good dinner, went away. Not one pledge was made. And later I called up some of these people, including ones I knew personally rather well, and said, aren't you investing? And they all said no. And I said, why not? And they said, we just don't trust the environment in Kerala. And I said, look, you get a literate workforce. People are relatively unemployed. They'll be grateful to have a job. They'll be smart. They're educated. They'll acquire skills very quickly. Said, yeah, but we can get them all. If we just establish the same factory across the border in Tamil Nadu, they'll come in, but the commies won't be there. The unions won't be there. The red flags won't be there.
The commies won't be there. We're going to Tamil Nadu because the commies aren't there. Oh my god! I shouldn't be laughing. I'm sorry. Composure.
That was the kind of feedback, and that became a very dismaying factor. To my mind, the communists, when they're in power, they don't behave like that anymore. And therefore, they should, at least while in power, they should have been able to attract more investment. They've not succeeded. And that is something that worries me more and more as a Keralite, because when people find that investors aren't coming, they know that they have no choice but to look for jobs elsewhere. I've done an awful lot of convocations in Kerala across the state and various kinds of disciplines. And I sometimes ask students, so what are your plans? And many of them are trying to get the heck out of the state. And when I ask them why, they say, what's there for us in Kerala? Isn't Kerala now an old age home, one young man said. And that's something that struck me.
That's really unfortunate.
Great place to retire, not a place to work. And that's not a good reputation to have, because you have to survive and you have to grow. And indeed, these old people need people generating incomes and paying taxes if they're going to be surviving.
I do want to say that Kerala, from what I've seen of it via like the geoguessing videos that I've done, exploring the geography, exploring some of the cities, very, very beautiful place. Absolutely stunningly beautiful. I can understand why tourism, is a main factor there, right? I mean, it's just unfortunate that people feel like they'd have to leave their home to find work. That is, you never want that as a population, as a country, right?
The other thing we need to think about very seriously is the regulatory environment. I mentioned that. The third thing we've got to think about is actually creating an environment in which business is looked upon as welcome rather than as in the old-fashioned thinking in other parts of India, which the rest of India has outgrown, but Kerala hasn't. This thinking that, he's coming in for his private profit and therefore we have to be suspicious of him and make life difficult for him. I've often pointed out in my speeches in Kerala that whereas many states sadly have witnessed the phenomenon of farmer suicides, the only state in India that has witnessed investor suicides is Kerala, where people, collect their life savings, come back home to Kerala to set up a business or an industry, and they find so many bureaucratic impediments and obstacles that their sunk investment cannot be recouped, they cannot function, they cannot operate the factory or whatever it is they built, and they end up in despair, having lost everything, committing suicide. There have been 2 such cases in the last 5 years, and it's shocking. It shouldn't be happening. So one of the things I wanted to do, for example, was to bring in an Investor Protection Act. It's not widespread. We don't have one anywhere else in India. but we should have one. Some countries have these, and they guarantee certain rights to investors. Obviously, once you start a business, the risk of success and failure is yours, but you shouldn't have to endure failure because you're not simply allowed to function at all by either bureaucratic or political obstacles placed in your path.
I mean, okay, so of course, your businesses and corporations, investors and whatnot are going to be hesitant with Kerala, right? Especially when communism is involved, because communism is the exact opposite, of that. The investors, the corporations, that's more of a capitalistic corporation type of ordeal. And from my understanding, communism, is all about everyone has equal rights, but no one can grow, be above or be below. So when it comes to like businesses, corporations, capitalistic ideas, what do these corporations gain when I don't know, it's very odd, it's very odd. And maybe I'm just not smart enough to fully understand. Maybe I'm too biased against communism to fully understand it all. But it feels like under communism everything is under the government. So why would these outside businesses want to go and be forced to be under this government? To be forced under all these, regulations, all these rules, and the things that they don't necessarily need to be under. So, like, where's the growth parameters for these businesses to go there and set up shop? Are they even allowed to grow? Because that's counterintuitive to like the whole communism idea, right? Like if they're growing, do they have to give their competitors, or can there even be corporate competitors under communism? Technically, you can't, right? I don't know. Again, maybe it's something I should probably have read more up on. I didn't think we were going to talk about communism in this video, but it, it's something I have to read up more on. Is all I'm going to say. We should probably move on.
And finally, I want to end Kerala's reputation as the one state in the country which still resorts to hartals at the drop of a hat. I want to make them illegal. I want to outlaw them in the state. Everyone has the right to protest in a democracy, but they should protest in a way that does not involve coercing others. There's a famous story. Some people claim it's apocryphal. Some people swear it's true, of how BMW had negotiated with the Uman Chandi first government back in 2006 to open a factory in Kerala to manufacture automobiles and automobile parts that would have generated 10,000 jobs. Everything was done. The executives came from Germany to sign the agreement, and the day they came, the commies had called a hartal on some political issue. And when they stepped out of the hotel, there were students throwing stones at cars. There were shopkeepers trying to open their shops and the shutters being forcibly downed. State buses being stopped and the air let out of their tires so they couldn't proceed. And these executives were so horrified, they promptly turned tail and fled. And the next month they went to Tamil Nadu, and the same factory was opened in Tamil Nadu, and the 10,000 jobs went.
That's that again. Really unfortunate.
There. Now, some people claim the story is not true, but I've heard it from too many sources, and it's too believable because Kerala has hartals all the time at the drop of a hat, and they're conducted with no regard for other people's well-being. There are old people on their way to hospital who have been prevented from going. There are students on their way to exams have been prevented from going. People on their daily commute who've not been allowed to board buses. And it's truly sickening, these things happening. I think it should be outlawed. And what is more, I believe it can be. I think there is more and more recognition. Why is it there are so few hartals when the communists are in power? Why should they have the freedom to resort to it every time they're in opposition, disrupting other people's rights? They have every right to protest, I repeat that, but they have no right to coerce others who want to go about their business and lead their lives. And
I 100% agree with this, what he's saying right here. You should have the right to protest, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of your fellow man, of your fellow citizen, of your fellow, human being. You shouldn't you should be able to protest, but you shouldn't go out and block roads or block businesses and uh, destroy property, take over entire swaths of land, because then you go from a protest to just outright being like a conqueror. You're going to war at that point, right? I don't know. I don't know. Protest should be good, but I don't know, man. It's tough. It's always a tough situation. Protests. Should I even get into it? Is this a topic that I should even get into? There are times when some protests have worked well, when they have disrupted the cultural norm. They disrupted, excuse me, um people's way of daily life. But at other times it's counterintuitive, and you just come off as a bad group. But we should just continue with the video, I think.
I think we can pass such a law in the event of a non-communist government coming into power in Kerala. We need to make it possible for Keralites to live and work in their own state, and outlawing hartals will go a long way to ensuring that investors have confidence, along with a slashing of overregulation, passing of an Investor Protection Act, and updating of many of our old-fashioned laws. I mean, there's still IT laws that and other laws that prohibit women from working off certain hours in the dark and things like that. All of that has to be revamped. We need a much more modern outlook to Kerala business and economy, and I think we can do that, and we can attract more people, because what Kerala has to offer is fantastic. It's a great environment, a great people, educated, smart, capable, and at the same time a very pleasant and efficient place to work, and very conscientious, law-abiding citizens for the most part, except the excessively politicized ones. I think we can get this place working again much, much better.
Sir, can you give me an example of this communist problem? Because I'm not able to understand. The investor is coming in, he's pouring in money, he's giving jobs, the government will also benefit because of the taxes. Then why are these people protesting or organizing a protest?
It's partially
Because that's capitalistic. It's like the complete opposite of a communistic way of governing things.
built into the DNA of the Communist Party. It's that if they're willing to pay you X, then what you deserve is X plus 2. And we'll fight for you to get it. And if they say, sorry, X is all we can afford, we'll make you go on strike, and then they have no choice but to pay you X plus 2 because they're losing more than that by not paying you.
So they're basically
that kind
demanding...
of mentality is built in. Instead of the kind of mutual understanding that is required between a responsible union and a responsible employer. This is what we're producing. This is what we're trying to get out of it. This is, the kind of profit we can make. This is what we can afford to pay you. A fair deal like that. That sort of dialogue should be happening much more and isn't happening. It's often been said that too many Keralite workers are conscious of their rights but have no sense of any obligations. And this notion of duties to your company, to your employer, to your state, to your society, that needs to be also a part of our approach.
So basically, when the investors come in, the workers say we want 2x more salary as compared to what they're willing to offer, because there's an underlying assumption that the investor is going to make 100x, so obviously he can offer 2x. And the investors say, when we can deal with X in Tamil Nadu, why deal with 2x in Kerala?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that correct?
That often happens.
Okay.
Already our wages are higher than any other state. And people who are coming to Kerala factor in that cost. There's also an assumption that Kerala tends to be less corrupt than other states. The sort of, even that unfortunately is changing of late. And again, thanks to communist rule, there have been a few scandals involving the state government, which frankly have been deeply troubling for many in Kerala, because that was not the reputation so much of the state in the past. But
I wasn't expecting this video to be so anti-communist. I don't know why. I was not expecting that to be the case for the first 25 minutes. Very, very strong anti-communist vibes going.
anyway, all of these things will have to be addressed. I'm not suggesting that anyone can wave a magic wand, and nor am I suggesting that any other state is perfect. But our problems seem to be particularly sui generis for Kerala.
So education, employable education, better ease of doing business, And we have to draw a thin line between protest that is meant for constructive purposes and protests that are meant for destructive purposes.
Exactly.
Okay. So now I want to bring your attention to the Congress manifesto. And there are some very interesting and concerning things over here. And when we ask the
Concerning? Tell me why.
community, one of the most concerning things is the MSP, sir. And I want to understand the logic behind
Minimum support price is the minimum price at which the government buys crops from farmers.
it, because all the information that I have clearly says that MSP is a disaster. But I want to understand from you, sir, why is MSP a good thing for the economy of India? For the farmers, it's obviously great. But how is it a good thing for the economy of India?
Well, look, I'm not a farmer myself, although my family were farming families till my father's generation. So I'm only 2 generations removed from the farm. But I will say that the logic was gone into in great detail in the Swaminathan Commission's report.
Yeah.
And it's Mr. Swaminathan who came up with 2 or 3 different formulae for ensuring a minimum support price. The problem is that farming should not be unviable for multiple reasons. 67% of our population is still living off the land, farming and farming-related occupations. Though farming employment is often seasonal, it still remains the principal source of employment in our country. I'm not saying it should be. I would love a day when more people were going into urban employment, manufacturing and so on, and IT and services, and fewer remained in farming. Because inevitably, as population grows, the number of people trying to live off the same parcel of land is going to be unsustainable. But the fact is, the reality today is still it is the principal employer in our country. And therefore, you want farming to be self-sustaining. To the extent that the farmer leads a decent life. In many cases where there is no MSP, many farmers are barely able to make ends meet, and they're one drought away from disaster.
True.
So one drought, and you're looking at farmer suicides as the option. That's a terrible situation to put your countrymen and women in. And to my mind, therefore, if MSP is a way of ensuring, and that to MSP for a larger palette of agricultural crops than currently is offered, then you will give farmers a certain sense of security. They're much more subject to the unpredictable elements of weather and so on than people in other professions. I mean, you're working in an office, it doesn't matter if it rains or not. You take an umbrella and that's it.
I'm assuming that do farmers in India get subsidies? Because in the U.S., a lot of the farmers get governmental subsidies to help with the cost of everything and any issues that might arise.
For a farmer, if it rains in an untimely way, his crop is ruined. If it doesn't rain at all, his crop is ruined. There are many, many issues like that. So it's an uncertain profession. MSP is the one assurance of security they get. But there are other things also that need to be done. I'm told that by what I've read of the agricultural crisis in our...
But okay, so if you're saying the MSP is to set like a bottom flat rate, so the price of the crop could be higher, but it can never go lower than set amounts, right? Then what's to incentivize people from creating a good product, a good crop, trying to grow the best crop? I know that's a weird, like, childish way to look at it, but just to simplify things down, if you can make this corn to be a super corn and sell it at the super high price, or you can put in like an eighth of the effort and make this really cruddy crap corn, but still sell it at a very decent price, higher than its value. I don't know. That's a very childish and like very simplistic way to look at it, but makes it a little bit more easier to understand, I guess.
Our country, there's serious issues relating to soil health.
Yeah.
Because the way in which, unfortunately, pesticides have been indiscriminately used.
Pesticides are evil. Pesticides are killing our planet. I hate pesticides, especially these big chemical pesticides. Like a more natural pesticide I'm fine with, but when it comes to literally spraying chemical death onto our planet with the chemicals seeping into the earth, getting into our water system, our water supply, and poisoning us in many factors, in many ways, I hate pesticides. Man.
use, much of our soil health is severely compromised, and the organic components needed in the soil are not there in many parts of the country. There's serious shortages of irrigation. Where crops are grown, there's unfortunately not enough cold storage and other facilities. So many crops, as I read somewhere, that India discards more fruit and vegetables than Australia grows in a year.
This is the same thing with the U.S. We throw away so much on a large scale farmer level, on a large scale consumer level. The amount of food and produce that is just lost in the US alone is astronomical.
So, I mean, these kinds of things need to be addressed as well. So it's a bigger problem than just MSP. But MSP is an important part of the puzzle. If we can get all of these things right, of course it'll be good for the economy of India, because these farmers, A, will be prosperous, they'll be growing more stuff, they'll be selling stuff all over the country and not just in the places where it's grown or near the places where it's grown, and they'll even be able to export and make more money. And, you'll be able to ensure the MSP is supposed to be a floor. If the market gives them a better price, they should be welcome to sell at that price. Is that if they can't sell, if for whatever reason it's cost you, I mean, in Kerala, for example, I actually met a bunch of farmers who told me it costs them 20 rupees to grow a pineapple, an individual pineapple, and the market gives them 6 rupees. How do you expect us to live? So they did a unique protest to this particular bunch of pineapple farmers. They stood at the busiest intersection in their market town and they gave away pineapples for free.
Okay.
To say, it's not worth it for us to sell it to you because we can't live on what you're going to buy it for. So take it. It was a Gandhian way of sort of, inflicting punishment on yourself to show how much you're suffering.
Sir, I actually have a counter argument to that, and I'll tell this to you using a story, and then you can correct me, because this is what will help me understand this better. Let's say the government decides to buy wheat at an MSP of 50 rupees a kilo, okay, and currently the market price is 30 rupees a kilo. Now, since it has become a legal right now, next year also the farmers will expect that the government will give an MSP of 50 rupees per kilo. Now, whether or not the government gives or not, that's a different question, but the farmers will expect that the MSP will be around 50 rupees a kilo. So today, if they overproduce wheat, they're scared that the market will not be able to buy so much wheat, so eventually they'll end up in a disaster. But if the MSP is made a legal right, tomorrow as a farmer, I will grow 3x, 4x more wheat without actually considering the demand in the market. So number one, it will lead to a supply-demand mismatch.
Oh wow, yeah.
The
I didn't even think about that. It's like, oh yeah, you're promising, this bag of corn, you're gonna give me, this X amount of money for this bag of corn. Wow, okay. Well, the town only needs this bag. Well, instead, I'm going to make 10 bags and give that to the town. You're going to give me money for all of that. Where's that money coming from? What are you going to do with the excess? Throw it away? Sell it to another country? I don't know. What is that? Did you see that on the screen? What is that? What was that? I have no idea, dude. It's still doing it. I don't know what that is. I could not even tell you. Anyways.
Second thing is that, sir, I spoke to a trader and he told me something very interesting. He said, even if the government buys all the crops at MSP, let the government buy, because the government does not have enough warehouses to store these crops. So let the government buy whatever they want, but in 2 to 3 months, the government will not have enough storage to be able to store that. So they'll have two options. Either sell the crop at a discount to us, or let the entire money go down the drain. During that time, we can leverage government's position to buy the same crops at 10 rupees a kilo. Now, in this entire story, do you realize the trader is able to get crops at a discount? The farmer is getting money, but it's the tax-based money that is going down the drain. And there's another problem also. Because MSP is such an important thing for all these farmers, it can also result into vote bank politics. So if elections are held next year, as a politician today, I will give more MSP to the farmers. Let's say I increase the MSP from 50.
Oh, then it's used as like a bribery tool as well, or like a not bribery, but what is the word that is used for, like, you're gifting people X so they would, they'd vote for you or be more favorable to you. There's a corporate term for it. I just can't remember what it's called.
50 rupees to 100 rupees. The farmers will be extremely happy. But if the cost of wheat goes up by 100%, the cost of bread will also go up. Eventually, it will result into inflation. So then there's a cat on the wall. If you decrease MSP, farmers will be unhappy. If you increase MSP, inflation will happen. and then the politicians will do what suits them best.
So your solution is let the market dictate.
My
That's how that's how it is in the U.S. Let the market dictate. But then also, of course, like I said, a lot of farms get subsidies from the U.S. as well, for different metrics and reasons. So I mean, there's got to be, a give and a pull.
solution is, let us give insurance and regulate free market in such a way that the government doesn't have to interfere. I don't know how that is supposed to be done, but clearly MSP to me does not seem
Then
like a
the question
solution.
comes up, are you going to keep it as a purely domestic market? Because, for example, there are some crops which are actually more expensive in India than abroad. But we've
True.
deemed it to be in our national interest that we should protect the farmers who are growing those crops in India. So in your example, for example, if you give an MSP for a particular item and the same item can be imported at half the cost of the MSP, why wouldn't it be imported? Because you won't make it legal to import.
Correct.
You ban the import of that product. Conversely, if there is an oversupply, why couldn't you export it? Again, government policy comes in. Will you permit the export of certain things which are oversupplied? You probably will, actually. So in your example of the wheat thing, if there is an oversupply of wheat in the market, instead of buying it all, the government will permit people to export it.
But that's if you can export it. If you can export it at a cost, at a price that other countries are willing to buy it, right?
And so they will be able to export it. Probably by the time you convert the foreign currency, you may get a better rate than the 50 rupees the government was giving you. Thirdly, there is no particular reason. As I said, I'm not a farmer or an agricultural policy maker, but there is no particular reason why the government can't announce in advance how much crop it's prepared to pay MSP for. They can say, we estimate the needs of this country in such a way, and the budget will permit us to buy X number of tons of wheat at X number of rupees. And once we've bought that number of tons, that's it. Story over. Then the rest you sell in the market as you wish. So that could be one way of doing it, and allocate those tons according to different wheat growing states, for example. And if you've got this MSP policy, it should be logically feasible to do it in a way that doesn't break the bank. I mean, no government can spend money it hasn't got in its budget. So in any case, you can't just leave a free hand to the farmer who's making a good deal on MSP to produce as much as he wants, more than you've budgeted to pay for. So all of these things have to be done in a sensible policy. And I assure you the Congress Party has sensible people, so that when we implement these manifesto commitments, it'll be done in a sensible way. But you have to take everything into account: the livelihood of the farmer, the interests of the consumer, the price sensitivity of the Indian person, because frankly, our country, we're all living at levels of salary and income that make us much more price sensitive than, say, somebody in the West. Given what a large share, for example, of your household income for the Aam Aadmi in India goes on food, we are truly much more sensitive to an increase in the price of tomatoes and onions than, say, any consumer in the West, because for him, his food budget is less than 10% of his monthly expenses. For us,
Not anymore. Inflation is on the rise in the US, and oh my God, the cost of food is crazy. As you can probably tell, I am a very large man. I do eat a lot. And I have noticed that certain items, almost most items, have gone up in 50, 60, 70% in cost easily. It's rather unfortunate. It is rather unfortunate. But anyways.
for us, it can be 70% of our monthly expenses, 80% of our monthly expenses. So we are a much more...
No, the food budget, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, it is food is so expensive, guys. Food is so expensive here.
price sensitive nation. So any government will bear all this in mind. Plus import-export policy will be a factor. That will also come in. And you've seen that when we were in power, there was no crisis with the farmers. We managed to do all this. There was a situation when, for example, in the interest of the consumer across northern India, we did sign an agreement with Malaysia to import palm oil over the protests of the Kerala farmer, because the Malaysian oil was cheaper than Kerala palm oil would be. And so the Kerala palm oil farmer got, I'm afraid, dissed in the process. But these are some of the trade-offs a responsible government makes. And in this particular case, from a Kerala point of view, it was unfair to us. From a national point of view, we were able to keep a reasonable price for this commodity throughout the country, etc., etc. So policies will have a larger palette of considerations than just one particular crop at one time at one price. There's a larger set of issues you've got to take into account.
So there's actually a very big challenge with exporting. Let's consider wheat. Majority of the wheat in the world comes from Russia and Ukraine. Corn comes from US, and palm oil, as you mentioned, comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, unless we are able to beat their prices, MSP will not help. And in order to be able to beat their prices, we need economies of scale and we need better technology. So don't you think it is better that the government invests in giving farmers insurance instead of loan waivers and gives them better access to technology in such a way that they achieve economies of scale and then let the free market prevail? Because like you mentioned, if the traders are willing to give 6 rupees for the pineapple, there are two ways to look at it. Number one, we don't sell to the traders. Number two, we regulate the traders, which is what the government could do. Or number three, we empower the farmers to an extent where they're able to produce pineapples at scale and decrease the cost to, let's say, 10 rupees, and then they sell it to the traders. Because why are traders buying at 6 rupees? Maybe because the consumers of India are not willing to buy it at a
Not willing to pay more.
larger rate. So then the question of export comes into play, right? But here there's a deadlock. Indian customer is not willing to pay and we can't compete with foreign players. So then what is the solution? The solution to that is not MSP but insurance and technology, isn't it?
That's part of it. I mean, for example, the use of technology. After all, we're the one country which has an organized system of agricultural officers in every state, agricultural extension workers, who do try and bring benefits of technology, new pesticides, new fertilizers, and so on to the attention of the farmer. So there has been, since the moment of independence, there's been an organized attempt by successive Congress governments, continued by BJP governments, to ensure that there is assistance given by the government to the farmer. For example, very recently in my constituency, I was very impressed to say I was asked to inaugurate a program in which the government was providing drones at a subsidized price to spray a fertilizer across.
Drones? That just seems, I don't know. It would be easier just to get a man with the hose out there, wouldn't it? Because not only do you have to pay for the cost of the drone, you have to pay for the cost of the drone maintenance, you have to pay for the cost of the drone pilot. I don't know. That just seems a little silly. I don't know.
Various fields. And because in Kerala land reform has been successful, everyone's holding is very small. So it's done collectively. An entire village or an entire panchayat will get the drone, and the drone will then do its work across a number of people's lands and farm holdings. So there are government policies already in place, Ganesh, that you and I as urban people may not.
Also, like the carrying capacity of a drone to spread pesticides, I would imagine is fairly small. You would have to constantly be refueling it. So then you're looking at a time metric, and you're taking up, what could have been done in, an hour, just for an example, would take multiple hours. I don't know.
May not be fully familiar with. But they do exist.
The drone
And I
thing
think
seems silly.
a mix of policies. I think the answer to your question, the short answer is, it will take a mix of policies. I certainly agree with you on insurance and technology, and there are other factors that I've mentioned to earlier. All of those put together could be the basis for a new agricultural approach. But what is clear is that the government that said that we will double the income of farmers in our time in office in one term has had 2 terms, and the income of farmers has not even gone up by 10% in these 10.
So real income has not gone up by 10%, but the income has actually gone up. It's just that the inflation has caught up very fast. And the one thing that when I spoke to the BJP leaders, they told me that there was COVID in between, there was Russia-Ukraine war in between, pesticides, fertilizers, all the costs shot
And
up.
their own irresponsible act of demonetization as well, which hit the agricultural sector very badly.
Agreed, sir. So they say that when it comes to so many things, we've doubled the income of the farmers. It's just that inflation has caught up faster.
No. They are the ones who also claim that inflation is record lows in India. Not true. Inflation has not been that high. They have simply not been able to. I mean, even if you take it in nominal terms, forget about the real terms and matching inflation. In nominal terms, it has not doubled. Just check the figures. I don't have them handy right now, but check the figures. The average income of a farmer in 2014-24, you will certainly not see 100%. You'll probably see 10 to 12% growth. That's it.
Are you sure, sir?
Absolutely.
Because I did check the stat recently, sir, about 2 months back. It did increase by 100%.
100%.
Yeah. Nominal income, not
checked,
real income.
If you've checked, then I will double check. Maybe.
Since the Modi government came to power, the average annual growth in real GVA in agriculture, forestry, and fishing till Quarter 2 fiscal year of 24 has been 4.2%. The absolute increase was only 38% till June 2023. Okay.
In some states, perhaps Punjab, maybe, I don't know. There may be one or two states where this has happened. It is certainly not broadly true, but I will double check that. In any case, inflation in our country is lower than many other countries, but is because we're a price sensitive nation, as I was arguing, we feel it more keenly. But here you're talking about inflation in sort of absolute terms. I'm curious as to, I will double check this figure.
Done, sir. Sir, one feedback that I have for the Congress party is that it would be great if you could release consultation papers and help us understand the intricacies of the policy better. Because now you're telling me that there are so many considerations that have been done, but it's not coming out in the media, certainly not in our hands.
No, in
And
fact, brevity was considered essential. I actually missed the meeting of the working committee because I was already campaigning in my constituency. But when they reviewed the draft manifesto, one of their concerns was it was too long. And so some things they trimmed down because they wanted it to be a digestible document for the general public. They wanted it to be read. And that's a very legitimate argument. But the last thing they want is for us to burden you with a lot more. If you like the outcome, when we come to power, we'll show you how we're going to implement it in a way that's viable. Look, everybody who runs a government wants not to have themselves saddled with an unviable set of numbers. And since for 10 years we were able to introduce a very strongly rights-based system in the UPA without bankrupting the government, we figured out ways of doing it. We'll do it again.
okay. So the next thing that I want to bring your attention to is the Mahalakshmi scheme. The Congress manifesto mentioned
Congress resolves to provide 1 lakh rupees per year directly to the bank accounts of the head women in every poor family.
that you're going to give out 1 lakh rupees to the women at the bottom of the pyramid. So I just did some math and I found out that if 1 lakh rupees is given to 30 million women, that comes out to 3 lakh crores. With 3 lakh crores, that's the education budget of the country, half the defense budget, and we can build 30,000 kilometers of highways. Now, I'm not saying that we should not give money to the poor. But here's my observation with the helper community. I spoke to my helper, spoke to a lot of his friends before coming to this interview. I asked him कि भैया अगर मैंने आपको 1 लाख रुपए दे दिए साल के तो आप क्या करोगे? And most of their answers were
I don't know what he said. That's unfortunate, but okay.
about increasing their standard of living. Okay. Now, this is not the money that they've earned. So, at some given point in time or the other, the government will have to withdraw this. Now, there are multiple possibilities that I see. The first is the ideal possibility that they invest in education, healthcare, and provide better life to their families in such a way that in the next 2 to 3 years, one of them goes on to earn enough money that they would not need this 1 lakh rupees. But the other 3 possibilities, that's where my concerns are. Number one, they could use that money to lead a standard of living that they may not be able to afford once this money is.
The thumbs up, the thumbs down. There's certain things that are going on. Again, it's still doing it. Listen, it's something to do. I record on a Mac, and it's something to do with that. I just haven't gone into the settings and changed it. I apologize. But yeah, like what he's getting at is if you're giving so much welfare, right? You're giving so much money to families. What's the incentive for them to stop being poor? Because they're getting money to be poor, right? But at the same time, I don't know.
Pulled out. Number two, this could then go into wrong things like alcohol consumption or betting.
Yep.
And betting is a big
Yep.
problem, sir,
Yep.
because
Yep.
yesterday
Yep.
my
Yep.
helper
That's
told
why
me
we're giving it
that.
to the women and not to the men.
But that doesn't guarantee that it wouldn't go to the.
That doesn't mean. Hold on. That's why he said. That's why we're giving it to the women and not to the men. Are you insinuating that men gamble and drink and bet and women don't? That's a bit sexist to assume that. That's funny. Oh, that's so funny. I want to hear that again. That was really funny.
Because yesterday my helper
That's
told
why
me
we're giving it
that
to the women and not to the men.
Oh, that's really funny. On that note, I mean, I don't live in India, obviously, but I don't drink, I don't gamble. Why can't I get that? Just because I'm a man. That's funny.
But that doesn't guarantee that it wouldn't go to the men, sir. Because yesterday I was speaking to my helper.
Oh, and his thing is like, oh yeah, but the women would just give it to the men. Okay, they're not seeing never mind.
He told me that he just lost 700 rupees in Satta. Okay. And the third possibility is that even if you give them all of it, they may just end up spending that money into liabilities and not assets. So, my question is, sir, instead of giving away, so I'll give you an example also. Let's say we give them transport subsidy, make buses free for men and women. The maximum that could happen is that a privileged man or a woman could use the bus for free. But that is still a good thing because they'll not use the car, eventually saving us from traffic jams. But in this case, the extreme scenarios are just too bad. So my question is, instead of giving them education subsidy, healthcare subsidy, and transport subsidy, why give them direct cash in their bank account?
I agree with Ganesh on this one. It should subsidize if you want to help the poor and the disenfranchised. You want to try to incentivize them to go towards oh, you'll get a discount at, going to school, you'll get, a discount on this travel to get to work, things of that nature, right? Rather than just, here's a bunch of money. Okay.
And that too so much.
There's been a lot of work done on this. As you know, internationally, this whole notion of a national minimum income has gained ground in a couple of Scandinavian countries.
He's going to go on and talk about universal basic income, which is something that I have thought about as well, on some level, but it's just the amount of money and the amount of money that a universal basic income, especially on a very large population, could disrupt major facets of like governmental infrastructure, right? Governmental spendings, and it's getting to the point where it almost seems like it will be necessary with the rise of AI, with the rise of automated work, pushing out, like especially pushing out like the lower parts of the workforce. But I don't know. It's very touchy. It's very weird. It's something that it requires a lot of debate. I don't know. We're gonna get back to the video.
Of a national minimum income has gained ground, and a couple of Scandinavian countries already implemented it. We will never have the budget, not in the foreseeable future, we don't have the budget to be able to guarantee everyone, irrespective of income, a minimum income.
Yeah, for a country as large as India, like a universal basic income would it would just be like the cost would be astronomical to give everybody, a guaranteed amount of money.
What we're saying is for those below the poverty line, let's give them a minimum income, because that will enable them to be able to be participants in the larger economy.
But then what if you're giving poor people money? What's the incentive of them becoming not poor? Because they will have money either way. And if you're on the border, if you're riding the line of the minimum required or the poorness level, what's stopping you from just, quitting your job and then writing off of that money you would get for being poor? That's another thing that you'd have to account for. There's a lot of people that they could work hard and be paid very little, even though they're working hard, and they would barely have more money than, say, if they were just to sit at home and do nothing, and just get that free money given to them from the government. I don't know. It's a very tough situation. There's a lot of things to navigate through with this topic.
Now, we would certainly not want to dictate to them how to spend it. Perhaps, as you say, they might spend it on health. Maybe they might spend it on education, though they shouldn't need to, because government education is still largely free, and we just have to improve the quality of that, which I'm coming to in a minute. But it's also possible they'll spend it just as consumers, as you say, buying things. But that too helps the economy.
But not them, no, sir. In
No.
3 years, they will not be able to sustain it.
But eventually, by buying these things, they become participants. And I mean, I've often argued the magic of the market is not going to appeal to people who can't afford to enter the marketplace. You give them a leg up to become participants in the economy, they'll want to be able to sustain that. I mean, no one just does it out of, you give them 1 lakh and perhaps they'll provoke themselves into earning 2 lakhs to be able to do that in future. So that's one more thing. You mentioned that this is the equivalent of the education budget. I believe that's a shame. I think the education budget should be very much higher, and government schools must be improved in quality. And we should be giving money to the states as well for education, as well as supporting the central supported education institutions. So a much larger portion of our budget needs to go into education. There are defense items that cost more than 1 lakh crores. I'm surprised you tell me it's half the defense budget. I will have to double check that, because my understanding is that half the defense budget is our pensions for retired military personnel. And that comes to a considerably larger sum. So I'm not sure it's half the defense budget, but be that as it may, we do need to up the amount of investment we make in the essentials of life, education and health, exactly as you've said. COVID was a wake-up call in the health area, and many governments, state as well as central, have realized that if we don't put more money into health now, we're going to have a real problem in the future. So that's going to happen. My hope still remains that because this is tied to your being in the BPL category, that increasingly as people are pulled out from below the poverty line, the number of beneficiaries will go down and the burden on the state will decline with time.
So, because I try to study every policy in history that I can think of or I could figure out where this kind of policy worked. But in most cases, it has ended up in a disaster. But that's also because it was combined with a lot of money printing, usually Latin America. So I'll not take that into consideration.
True.
But you also mentioned something about their participation in the economy. Sir, as an entrepreneur, I think even that is a disaster. I'll give you an example. My course, Communication Masterclass, is for 3,000 rupees. So let's say the Congress gives out 1 lakh rupees to all of my customers. I'm going to have a great 2-year run. But in the 3rd year, when that money goes off, suddenly I'm going to see a collapse in my revenue because my customers no longer have money. So this is a very big ambiguity to have, to say that I will trust the people of the country with 1 lakh rupees, which is possibly going to double their income, and hope that they would spend it the right way. Because the risk is to reward is too crazy.
No, but let me say, however they spend it, as the economy grows, the revenues coming to the government will also grow, so we won't need to stop it in the 3rd year. We'll have the money. But meanwhile, as the number of people below the poverty line goes down, we're spending less and we're earning more. It's a win-win for us too as a government.
This just facilitates on this would only work if the vast majority of the people that you gave money to are incentivized to go out and work and make more money. But I don't think deep down in a lot of people that that's what they would do.
Sir, don't you think increasing ease of doing business and getting more FDI is much easier as compared to just giving away 1
Depends on
lakh?
how the FDI is invested. Now, too much of it is just portfolio investment in our country. We don't have enough FDI coming in job generation work. And that worries me too. We can't just boast about FDI for its own sake. FDI has to be linked to something directly beneficial, particularly in the job market. Our unemployment levels are truly unsustainable right now. And we're busy destroying the demographic dividend that we should have had, that we were talking about 10 years ago when I was in government.
Very interesting, sir. So this is the second last question that I have for you, and I don't know what this means, so you can help me understand this. What is this wealth redistribution survey, sir?
But we've never actually talked about wealth redistribution.
Okay.
Wealth redistribution, another communistic idea. Take money from the top and give it to everybody. Your money is everybody's money. Your PlayStation is everybody's money. Everybody's PlayStation. Your PC is everybody's PC. Your car is everybody's car. Your food is everyone's food. That's wealth distribution. It does ring very communistic to me.
Not in the manifesto.
Okay.
It's not.
Never actually talked about wealth redistribution.
Okay.
Not in the manifesto.
Oh, okay. So this wealth redistribution is not in the Congress manifesto. I guess that's why they only talk about it for a minute and a half.
Okay.
What we've talked about is that the party has made a political decision we need a caste survey. And the logic of that is that as long as in so many states and indeed at the center, in fact, in every state and in the center, so many benefits are pegged to caste identity, it seems irrational that we don't have an accurate count of who claims allegiance to what caste. I personally believe one of the options should be to refuse to identify yourself with a caste. There should be a no caste option. But that's like nota for the voting. But that apart, if people want to claim allegiance to a particular caste, the government has a much more accurate picture of who is where, and therefore it may turn out, of course, and that's where the political calls will have to be made afterwards, it may turn out that some people have been overestimated and are getting more reservations than their numbers deserve, and there may be others who don't. But we need to...
So he's talking about caste and reservations for like schooling and job positions, right? Again, that's if you're reserving something for a particular set of people, you're not getting the best people for that position, that spot. You're just filling it with a quota. That's my, my belief on it.
See, if you're giving government benefit, then their numbers deserve, and there may be others who don't. But we need to see if you're giving government benefits to people after identifying their caste identity, you may as well know what numbers you're really dealing with. I don't think the Congress party or any other party has pledged themselves to any specific outcome after that. Rahul Gandhi spoken about an X-ray, by which he means understanding what the real picture is. What is the exact distribution of castes in the country, and we want a socio-economic caste survey so people are revealing their income levels as well as their caste. Now, there's a massive correlation, for example, between Dalits and poverty. Then we need targeted programs to ensure that Dalits are pulled out of poverty. I mean, that's a very reasonable policy prescription for any government to make. I don't see this as something that's radical, and certainly the BJP is caricaturing it as going off and literally stealing money from people and taking their Mangal Sutras away and giving it to Muslims. I mean, this is unfortunately, this is nasty scaremongering that is not worthy of a ruling party.
So that is the reason why I often say that if the party is more communicative about the detailings of it, it'll become much easier for people like us to explain that.
Well, I'm communicating with you, I hope. And
yeah, that is the reason why I'm
no
very
words
glad
you
for
couldn't
this.
understand,
Yeah.
Ganesh, after what you said to me at the beginning.
That is the reason why I'm so glad for doing this interview, sir. Sir, one last question. So far, so good, sir?
So far, so good.
Okay.
I
Sir,
hope.
sir, I love it, sir.
Great.
Sir, I just want to understand from your perspective as to what are the three most important things that we need to focus as a country, and how do we execute it? Because I know that a lot of people have spoken about a lot of things, but the execution is somewhere missing to a large extent. And I do appreciate the BJP for doing what they've done. But in the next 5 years or the next 10 years, I'm sure we would need something much more than what we've done in the past 10 years. So what are the three most important things according to you?
First of all, I've been reluctant normally to answer that kind of question because I believe no government can afford to neglect any area.
Okay.
But having said that, I mean, we will have to work across the board in every sector of the economy. But
Okay.
I would say, for me, the number one priority is human capital. Which is not to say I don't care about the infrastructure. I think it's like a computer that needs both hardware and software. The hardware of development, the ports, the roads, the airports, the railway lines, these are essential and we have to do those, have to continue doing them. But the software of development has been neglected, and that's the education, the health access to healthcare within, say, 5 kilometers of your place of residence for every Indian. Educational opportunities that give you a decent prospect of getting into a real job and a real future. The ability to have a decent standard of living where you can afford to eat, have a roof over your head, etc. Clean drinking water, which is an underappreciated vital need for people in our country, which is sadly in many, many places, for many different reasons, not adequately available. So these are all things that generate human development, that make people happy, productive citizens of your country, your economy, your society. So that has been underemphasized. And I believe if I were to have a say, I would want to see a greater expenditure of effort and resources on these sectors: education, health, and basic provision of essentials for human beings. My idea is that every Indian will only truly feel that he's living in a Viksit Bharat if he's able to dream of a better future for his children by giving them a decent present and equipping them to lead a better life than he's had so far. And that's something which we can do. I resent all these comparisons to China and so on. We have no desire to become China. We are not China. We are very happy for the Chinese to be happy and grow and prosper. Let us grow and prosper in our own way, but let us make sure that our people have exactly what they need. And to my mind, this is something that we really need to give greater importance. So the number one is human capital. Number two is the physical infrastructure, as I say, both the hardware and the software. But the third is the operating system. I mean, I'm really using the computer analogy because it's so familiar to most of your listeners today. And the operating system is
the computer analogy is a great analogy, by the way. It's fantastic analogy.
Entire apparatus of administration, regulation, government machinery, politics that frankly needs a thorough look at. I talked about Kerala in that context. Certainly we can do better nationally. When we were in power, we had asked Mr. Veerappa Moily to come up with a very detailed report on administrative reforms, only a portion of which have been implemented. I think it's worth looking at it again and maybe taking a fresh look. I thought the BJP did a good job in eliminating obsolete laws. We need to continue that work, but we also need to look much more severely at regulations. See, laws are relatively easy to take off the books. Regulations have an insidious habit of staying put forever and becoming entrenched in bureaucratic practice. And we need to take an axe to regulations and processes. We need, I think, to do all three: the hardware, the software, and the operating system, and we'll have a truly successful country in the years ahead.
Wonderful, sir. One last question can we take? Yeah. Okay. Sir, my next question is about the old pension scheme. And Congress often...
Employees who have worked for at least 10 years get a monthly pension based on their last salary. In this scheme, the government pays the whole pension amount without deducting it from the employee's salary during service.
talks about and even endorses old pension scheme. I think you've even brought it back in some states. Why, sir? Old pension scheme was such a big burden on the nation, wasn't it? And then the Vajpayee government brought in the new pension scheme. It's been 20 years. Now we're just about to reap the benefits of the new pension scheme. Why are we going back to the old pension scheme?
Well, some of it is short-term politics in that people are not doing very well and they feel that they need a more generous pension opportunity to be able to survive in old age. But it's also human needs. I'm sorry to say that in many cases, the new pension scheme left people in rather destitute condition in their old age. See, we don't really have a social safety net in our country. I'm sorry to say that I've seen many old people relying principally on whatever savings they were able to set aside or were lucky enough to inherit. But those who are purely reliant on pension, particularly government pensions, have suffered a lot, even in a relatively advanced state like Kerala. And it's partially because there is no other security. I mean, you need that pension for every essential of life. And if, God forbid, you fall ill, you can't afford to be treated because the pension is the only income you've got and it hasn't come on time or it isn't enough. So these are the reasons why some of these basics of life need to be attended to. I do think we'll have to take a look at all the numbers of all of that once again. But remember that most of these pension issues are actually state government issues and not national ones. Yeah. And each state government is always free to take a decision that it believes is sustainable within its budget. So I would not say that there is a universal blanket policy across all states. If I'm not mistaken, every state has had a different approach over the years, including Congress-ruled states as well as other opposition party-ruled states. And of course, BJP states have not gone for it. We'll have to see. But there is no doubt that in some states with a large number of government pensioners, it's a vote-winning proposition, and that can sometimes be a powerful motivating factor in a closely contested election. But I will say that there are larger human issues involved in the pension that we have to also look at.
So is it worth that I wouldn't say worthiness is the right word. Do you think the government needs to pay this money from its own pocket? Because if we start paying that amount of money, I don't remember the exact figure, but it was staggering. If we spend that much amount of money into pensions and the government lies at the center of it, you just said that the job of the government is to create an ecosystem and not be readily involved in the process. Here we are putting the government right at the center of something so critical.
Look, I mean, even the US, which is after all a completely sort of free economy, is finding huge difficulty sustaining their social security system. There is a contributory pension scheme in that country where the private sector has also got involved, but the government administers it. Increasingly, for example, some employers are saying we're not going.
But as an employee working in the U.S., you pay into Social Security.
Going to give you a pension, we'll contribute to a retirement fund, and you invest it as you see fit. There's something called a 401k in America.
Yep.
There
You do 401k as well, yeah.
are various formulae being tried around the world. My own answer would be that I don't know the answer. I would rather have an expert group sit down and study the best practices around the world and see what can be done. You're wrong to suggest that it can't be done from the center, because the Scandinavian countries do it through central government provided social
Yeah,
security.
but the Scandinavian countries have a way smaller population. That's the one thing you got to take into metric, man. Man, oh my God, here I am. Oh God, talking like a millennial. The Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, the population is, minuscule in comparison to a country like India. Hmm.
They, of course, charge much higher taxes, and their basic revenues are also at a higher level from things like North Sea oil in the case of Norway and so on. And so they're able to afford it. But they do have a substantially government taxpayer based social security, welfare net, and pension scheme that gives people a very comfortable life when their working days are over.
But again, though, how many people are there?
Now, I'm not sure we can afford that, but we can at least study how they did it, how they're doing it. We can see what principally private systems like the
They can do it because they don't have that many people.
US one work, and we can also see what other national systems are doing better. No system is perfect. I mean, the fact is that as our lifespans increase, we are all going to be living longer than any of the old pension schemes calculations assumed when they were first devising what was a viable number. When Bismarck came up with the very first pension in the 1880s, I think you were talking about a lifespan that reaching 60 and crossing it was a small miracle for the vast majority of people. Yeah. Today, I mean, there are routinely, people in their 90s around us. Perhaps by the time you get to my age, it'll be people in their hundreds around you. So you really have to think long and serious about these policies. And it's a reality of democratic politics that you make policies for the short term, because you can only think 5-10 years ahead. The world will change after that, and you may not be in power anyway. So it's very rare for a government of any country in a democracy to make a policy today thinking of what's good for the country in 20 years. So please bear that also in mind when you're looking at what's politically realistic. But there are thoughtful people in the Congress who will pay attention to these concerns.
So to summarize your answer, number one, old pension scheme and new pension scheme both have their problems and both of them have their benefits. We cannot directly go back to the old pension scheme because the world has now changed after 20 years. But if at all you decide to go back, you will go back with certain considerations in such a way that you study the policies across the world and bring in something that is of less economic burden as well as more human benefit to the people of India.
And you'll also have to factor in, for example, how our other policies may have increased governmental revenues and therefore may be more sustainable. Because all these other policies we're talking about will significantly, without raising taxes, just have a larger economy that will be giving us more revenues and that which we can spend for social welfare purposes like this. That's part of the logic. Now, one of the reasons that Congress, as a party of liberalization, can afford to speak about social justice is that our attitude to the revenues that come from liberalization is to spend it on the marginalized, the poor, and the impoverished, and not on, India shining kinds of stories. That's the big difference between us and the party in power today. So we want to grow the economy. We just want to spend the benefits of that in a more humane way.
Or we can just go and find oil like Norway and have a settled life for the rest of the century. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the fact that you've been so elaborative with your answers. I could understand everything. And thank you for using simple English. Thank you so much, sir. I just hope you had a great experience.
Thank you, Ganesh. Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's a good video. I really enjoyed that. Okay. Yeah, that was a really good video from Think School and Ganesh there. I really enjoyed the interview. It was very thought-provoking and gave me a bit more of an insight on the current political going-ons over in India. And that's why I am reacting to videos like this, is to have a better insight on, a different country, different culture, different governments. than comparative to like my own. Like I mean I watch those sort of things, in relation to my country, but it's always good seeing a different perspective from a different group of people. It helps with broadening the mind, right? Enriching yourself in other cultures and other ideas and other thought processes. So that's why I do these. I react to these sort of videos. I really enjoy reacting to these sort of videos, and also I'm learning. And if I am reacting to these videos, if there's something that I miss or something that I don't clarify on, or something that is a little bit too different of a topic, comparatively, like a specifically something that's specific to India that I don't have any idea of, you guys who are watching the video can help me in the comments. And that's another one of the reasons why I like doing these, because I like to talk in the comments to people, a whole bunch of people. Very interesting, very cool. So, there's a lot more going on. There is a lot more going on than I had first originally thought. And that's okay. That's okay. It just means that just means that there's more for me to learn about. I think it's time to go ahead and look at the comments now. So, are you? I was going to read Think School's comments. Are you satisfied with Doctor? Again, I'm terrible with names. It's Sushi. Sushi. Is that how you pronounce it? Answers. Do you like our questions? Please drop a detailed feedback episode. Heart as you reply to your comment. Problem with Kerala is Congress considering right wing in Kerala. Imagine that. Wait, Congress is considered right? Oh yeah, because communists, right? Next, Ganesh should interview Dr. S. Jai Shankar. Shankar. I don't know who this is. I am a Keralite and I graduated in electronics 15 years ago. I couldn't even find any remote job in Kerala in which I majored. Now working in sales field, I hope new generations don't end up like many of us. Few things I admire about this video and would like to like it in your future interviews. It is unedited, well researched, not trying to lead the questions or create something controversial or sensational. All three very good points. Well done, Ganesh. These are the type of interviews in which should be happening more, especially during elections, based on numbers, logic, not on emotions and passions. I'm glad that we have reached a stage where these are beginning to happen. More power to your tribe. All right, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit, or we can just go and find oil like Norway. Yeah, just find some oil, man. Just get rich off that oil. What's the difference between a communist party and a party that says give one lock to one woman in a household and give one lock to all unemployed graduates? They're pretty much the same. Do you know the difference between the central planning and free market economy? Then they will spend all of it for EMI and credit card bills. Oof. Why have why have developed countries implemented minimum incomes? Nothing, just missing sickle and hammer in their party symbol. Okay, all right, all right. Freebies are not uplifting a poor life, but it's turning them lazy. That's what I was saying. But I think you should share this episode with, how do you pronounce his name? He is also a good leader, but the education system should change. Ganesh BHAI, your MSP questions and example is just awesome. Wow, what a talk, fire. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed every second. A much better, sensible, elaborate conversation than what happens in Parliament. It was a very good conversation. I really enjoyed listening to it. I'm a software engineer. I always like, oh, excuse me. God, my dyslexia is like through the roof. I'm a software engineer. I always think when India will have our own products like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, SpaceX, OpenAI, and so many, it's not just only companies but standards too. I will say nearly impossible. Even we have some companies and products that also on top of American standard or technologies, even the simple $50 USD software certification itself. And if we look at TCS and Info Systems, these are all service-based companies, not product-based. Of course, we need that, but some product companies too. India is nothing to do with AI rather than use the American tech. Anyway, we are not bad while comparing with other countries with America. Maybe the investment focus is the problem. Maybe because the independence 247 years ago. We just got 77 years ago. Okay, so this person's just saying that there's not enough actual product being constructed. And I mean by product, I don't mean like a physical good, but like, well, it could be a physical good. Services and products being constructed in India, and that's one of the major downfalls, right? Because in the U.S., you like he said, you have Facebook, Amazon, Apple. You have all these tech companies with all these services, and I guess you don't really have that in India. I'm sure there's Indian specific things, but they're not just like on a world dominating scale as like Facebook. So. OMG, I was just impressed with your line of questioning. Kudos. As usual, I loved it. And Ganesh, kudos to your hard work. Kudos. Kudos. This is the template how the interview should be. Great job, Think School. Yeah, it was a very good interview. I really liked it. I'm going to sort by new comments and see. New comments are up in the air. BJP will lose election if it is year 21-24. Well spoken. Or use this. Or us, this is cinema. I don't know. Whoever led India, they must keep in mind to increase its GDP like China. China touched 18 USD trillion GDP with less talk and more work on the ground. India needs world-class infrastructure in all sectors to become world-class country like Singapore. Excellent conversation with both of them putting forward their views and opinions clearly. Good man in wrong party. Best example of first video of communication masterclass. If you're a master of English and saying rubbish, then it's not communication. Question of MSP and Malakshim scheme. God, I cannot say that. Reply. Okay. All right, I'm just going to move on. Speaking good English doesn't make you intelligent. Speaking badly English doesn't make you unintelligent. I should know that myself. Follow news, laundry for farmer, double income ground report. Okay. You should have also asked on why did they increase Muslims quota. I don't know if that was like relevant to what they were talking about, business related stuff. I've been following politics for a long time. I've noticed everyone knows the problem details and complexity and factors. However, no one has the adequate solution to the problems. That is one of the main problems. Everyone knows the problems, but for whatever reason, we don't know how to fix the problems. Interesting. Okay, I think that's enough comments. Yeah, so again, great video. I really enjoyed this video. Gave me a lot of insight. If you want to see the video, it is linked in the description down below. Remember to go and give them a like, give them a subscribe. I need to give them a like. How shameful of me. And if you enjoyed my reaction to it, or if you have any insight or any corrections, let me know down below in the comments. And if you want to see more reactions, remember to like, subscribe. Also, I do take requests when it comes to reacting to videos. I have a very long list, and I cannot promise when or how I will get to your video, but eventually I plan on getting through my watch list. It's like 70 videos long, but I plan on getting through it, so yeah. If you have a video that you want me to see, put it down below, and I will try to get to it. But with that being said, thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you all have a good one. Take care. Good night. Goodbye. Good night. Goodbye. Goodbye.